Hello and welcome everyone to this week's edition of Diecast Emporium Military Mondays, presented by my friends at smallscalehobbies.com. You know the drill. Visit their website, smallscalehobbies.com, for all of your military and wargaming needs. If you are local to the Manitowoc, Wisconsin area, they do have a physical storefront, so I encourage you to check that out as well if you are able. In this week's edition, we're going to be taking a look at the tank that holds the distinction of being the first American main battle tank employed in combat during the Second World War. It is the M3 Lee medium tank. The model that you see in front of you is an HO or 187 scale. It is a resin kit that I have built, painted, assembled, and decaled. The main kit itself is by Alsacast, and it is available. This exact model is available from Small Scale Hobbies. There will be a link in this video's description. All you have to do is look down here and click on the link if you want to add it to your collection. All right, so a little bit of background information about this vehicle. I already told you that this does hold the distinction of being the first main battle tank employed in combat during World War II. The British used the M3 in North Africa as early as 1941. However, we quickly found out that its armor was no match for the heavier German tanks. It did have one advantage on its side, and that was its speed. This was actually a pretty nimble and quick tank. Once the M4 Shermans became readily available in mass numbers shortly thereafter, the M3s were relegated to low-intensity theaters. The M3 came in two distinct configurations. The one that you see in front of you, this is the U.S. configuration known as the Lee, named after Civil War Confederate General Robert E. Lee, while the British configuration turrets were known as Grants after Union General Ulysses S. Grant. The main difference in the two different turret configurations is that the British had one main requirement that had to be fit, so they modified the turret so that the radio could be placed next to the TC or the tank commander. Alright, so how much does this thing weigh? Well, it still weighs 30 tons, but in terms of armor or tanks, that's actually not that much. It's 18 feet 6 inches in length. Also unusual for a tank is that if you look at the turret that sits up on top of the tank, this is actually not the main gun. We talk about tanks really before and after this vehicle. Turrets are usually the traversable 360-degree main gun. This is actually the secondary armament. The main gun is located here. And that brings us to the serious drawback of one of the serious drawbacks of the M3s, and that is that you had to turn the entire vehicle if you needed to reposition to engage an enemy or engage an enemy tank. Not exactly ideal when you're facing obviously much more advanced and better German armor that, of course, does have a 360-degree traversable turret. So, yeah, not ideal. Maybe you can throw your hands up and say, hey, Mr. Fritz, could you give me about 5 minutes to reposition so I could get a couple rounds off at you before you knock me out with your big main gun? Not great. So, again, once the Shermans were developed and, made readily available, Mr. Lee went back to rear echelon duty for the most part. They were used, obviously, they used the undercarriage for a couple other vehicles that would come along later in the war, but you thought being in a Sherman was dangerous early on in the war? Try being in one of these at the very start of the war. So the gun, the main gun that I just told you is not traversable, it doesn't move unless you want to move the whole tank around, is 75 millimeters, and the turret that does traverse up on top, the secondary armament, is a 37 millimeter gun. So that is basically the story of the M3 Lee medium tank. Let's take a look and focus in on the actual model now. As I said, this is a 187 scale or resin kit built by Alsacast, so it does come in kit configuration. You do have to assemble and build it. Honestly, forgive me, guys. It's been a long day. I don't remember if I showed you the packaging or not. So we're going to take another look at it here. This is the box, Alsacast, M3 Lee Military 187 Scale Adult Collectible. Here is your item number if you need that. Again, you shouldn't because there will be a link right down here for where you can buy it on the website. But if you do, it's 8775.204. You do have to assemble this, mock it up, prime it, paint it, and decal it, which I have put a couple different decals on this. The decals do not come with this kit. They are an optional extra that you have to buy. I chose to use a set that I got from Small Scale Hobbies, and they turned out quite well, in my opinion. So they're called Decal Details. This is the packaging that they come in. And these are what your decals will look like. Hopefully this will come through. They're a little bit hard to see because they're all white. As you can see, you have some stenciled stars, the stars in the circle, some smaller stars, U.S. Army written here. You can get these for all different scales, all different time periods, all different countries. So if you're modeling Japanese or German tanks, or different other vehicles as well, you can just type in what you're looking for, and chances are those decal sets will pop up under the search. Now, for those rivet counters out there that want to tell me that these stars are not exactly correct for this tank, you are incorrect, because I did extensive research on the internet to make sure that I had these stars exactly right. It depends on what year you're talking about. It depends on what theater of operation and what unit these M3 tanks would be associated with. So let's say, for example, that this M3 was in North Africa and it was a British tank. The markings would be completely different than what you see here. So generally speaking, I just went with the standard white star that are on the side of the turret up on top, and a single white star right here on the front of the tank. You will have, obviously, identification numbers on the back. You will have a couple other details for other identifiable markings. I don't have any decals to put on as of yet, as of the filming of this video. But in terms of the star placement, it is historically accurate to several reference photos, which I try to get pretty darn close on all the models that I do. Paint, obviously, Tamiya Olive Drab World War II. Did black rubber for the tracks, and I painted the shovel in silver. You can see that there's an axe here, which I did wood brown for the handle and then black for the tip of it. There's also some other details which you can see that are trying to come through here. But that's what's really cool about these resin kits, is that once you paint and detail these, a lot of even the bolt detailing will shine through and look really good. You can see the rollers and all the sprocket details and stuff. It does end up looking like a pretty darn good looking model at the end of the day. So that will conclude my review and this week's episode of Diecast Emporium Military Mondays, brought to you by Small Scale Hobbies. So a huge thanks to all of you that have really made these videos quite popular. I know it's definitely a different series than what I typically focus on this channel when we're talking about construction models or vocational trucking models. But obviously it does allow me to show and share my passion with you with military history, and then bringing scale models into it and combining them into one complete video. So thank you all for showing these videos some love. If you have any comments or questions, leave them in the comment section below. Until next time, take care, be well. I'll see you in the next review.